Well, welcome everyone to the Your Brain Shift podcast, where we explore topics that promote mindset shifts and brain shifts for greater success, health and wellness, and fulfillment. I'm Keith Engelhardt, and I'm chatting today with Rita GARNTO, a stress management educator, a simple self-care expert. Rita was a participant and keynote in my Total Health Summit back in 2019. She has over 3 decades of experience in the healthcare field, and her in-depth study of stress management and self-care drives her actions today, which is to educate others using simple self-care techniques and to combat stress. And we certainly need that in these trying times. Rita's book, Simple Self-Care Saved Me, was released back in 2018 and has readers across the U.S., Canada, Europe, and Australia. She's also an accomplished speaker and does stress education and strategy implementation through workshops, seminars, and her membership-based community. So, Rita, welcome to the Your Brain Shift podcast.
Thank you, Keith. It's nice to see you. I know it's been a couple of years, so it's nice to be back.
Yes, it has. Time flies when you're busy helping people reduce
when
their
you're on
stress.
Lockdown. Yeah, time flies when you're on lockdown. Yeah,
that too. So tell me, how did you begin your journey into helping others combat stress?
Oh my gosh. So I used to be a respiratory therapist. I went right from high school to respiratory therapy. And towards the end of my career, I was a part of the Charlotte, the Med Center Air Trauma Flight Team here at Caroline's Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we were, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of pushed, or it was suggested that we create some presentations that we could put out to the community. And so I just, in 1997, go figure, I picked stress management because at the time it was actually a very stressful time for me, and working on the flight team itself was very stressful. Mm-hmm. So it really sort of evolved from there. You know, I presented that several times. I spoke at a symposium. And then I left the field of respiratory and became a massage therapist. And then my focus was more on self-care, mm-hmm. realizing that if we could take better care of ourselves before we get into the hospital, then hopefully we'll delay that, or we won't get in the hospital at all with whatever, ailment or disease. And I started doing self-care workshops, and, clients kept encouraging me and sort of pushing me forward. And then my husband and I, we adopted 2 beautiful toddlers. I was almost 46. And that was like really, really stressful. So I was running a massage business, and we'd been in the adoption system for 3 years, had gone through infertility. And all of a sudden, poof, we had these two beautiful daughters that were 18 months and almost 4 at the time. So that was a huge change. And within 6 months, my stress level became so high that I just felt like the world sort of collapsed in on me. And I remember distinctly this one day sitting on the deck and just crying and just being so overwhelmed. Like, how am I going to do this? Will the kids ever love me? Do they even like me? And I'm a horrible mom. All the things that mm-hmm. kind of run through the negative.
All those negative Nelly messages from that.
Yeah. Yes.
Left brain chatter. Yeah.
Yeah, all that icky brain chatter. Yeah. And then also feeling very alone, thinking that, wow, everybody in my neighborhood behind their closed doors are probably like awesome moms, and I'm the only one here that screams and yells at my kids or sits here and cries and doesn't know what to do. So I went to the doctor that day and loved my GP, and he gave me a prescription. And as he handed it to me, he said, "So what changes are you going to make?" And I'm like, "What? What do you mean, what changes am I going to make? You just give me the pill to make it all go away, right?" So no, And that question really was a catalyst, because all of a sudden I was, thinking about that question, and it's like, wow, okay, well, if I make some changes, then I can control the stress in my life. And so it's really, that was in 2009. So really, that started the journey of being this simple self-care expert. And I have developed a strategy or a technique or a concept of self-care. And that's what I speak about now. And I teach it, and I help people, stress less and live happier. So that's really sort of how it all started.
Yeah, I love that nudge that your physician gave you about what changes you're going to make. One of my favorite cartoons that kind of is a nudge in that direction is it shows two service windows in a wall, and a person behind the counter at each one of them. And the left side, there's a sign says pills and surgery. And then the right side, the sign over the window says lifestyle changes. Yeah. Well, there's a huge line on the left side for the pills and surgery, but there's absolutely no one in line for the lifestyle changes.
It's true, because it takes work. Right?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. It takes a commitment and work, but it is worth every ounce of energy and every second of time you spend on it, because first of all, it can have less impact on our biology. Pills can be at times short-term solutions, but they also tax our systems, our liver, our kidneys, and their side effects and so forth. And usually they don't get to the root causes.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there are points where medication is needed to act as a bridge, but that bridge is strengthened by lifestyle changes. You have to have one goes with the other. So I completely agree. So that was really a power statement for me, and it gave me that control back. And I, health issues, back issues, knee issues, and so being in pain, chronic pain, is also very wearing on sort of your whole life, mentally especially. Mm-hmm. And so having something that, wow, okay, you mean if I make some changes, then, wow, I did a stretch when I brushed my teeth. Well, I have to brush my teeth anyway. So now I'm doing a runner stretch, stretching out my hip flexors, and wow.
Yeah, use those opportunities to anchor new habits to existing daily ones. It's actually a well-grounded technique to get success at any kind of change that we want to accomplish.
Yeah. So it's really, my philosophies are very much about setting yourself up for success. So let's pick one thing to change. And I always find that, because I clearly state that in my master classes and any workshops, and inevitably, at the end, when I say, okay, what's the one thing that you're going to start implementing immediately? What are you just going to start doing today? There is always, and it's always a woman, not discriminating against my own sex, but always a woman that says, well, I'm going to start working out every day. I'm going to stop eating sugar. I'm only going to eat green food. And the list, and there's the 5 things. And, I'll look at her and say, that's great, but I said one. And we're overachievers, right? We think, man, we can change our life just like that. I'm going to do da-da-da-da-da-da. And by day 2 or 3, you're like, I can't, this is too hard. So
yeah, there's nothing wrong with having those large goals, but the success at what's the old questions, how to eat an elephant, one bite at a time or something like that. Yeah, that we have to shrink the change if we want to really be consistent and obtain success. Shrink the change. What's the small first action that I can take? Repeat it till it's a habitual habit. Then the next one and the next one. But we in our culture have conditioned that we have to have instant success and we have to have large success goals. So I've learned
instant gratification. And what's really sad is that if you think, how many times did we stop doing something, not realizing that maybe tomorrow was the day we were really going to hit that success
and achieve mastery. Yeah.
Yeah, that you don't. So it's and I tell myself, and some days, just because I teach, stress management doesn't mean I'm not stressed myself. I practice what I preach. I have to. My daughters are now teenagers. Like, really? Mm-hmm. So
nothing stressful about that, right?
No. So when I find that I'm getting overwhelmed, because I have a history of anxiety and getting overwhelmed and not dealing well with a lot of stress, that I remind myself, just do one thing today. What's the one thing I'm going to do today? Baby steps. What can I do today just to get through today? Because tomorrow's going to be better.
Yeah. And our goal is never to remove stress. Challenge is a normal part of life. We even now know that even simple cell animals like an amoeba, if you give them ideal conditions, perfect temperature, perfect amount of food or whatever, they won't be as healthy and resilient as if they're challenged once in a while. We need a moderate level of challenge or stress, and there's two categories of stress: distress and eustress. One's positive and the other one's more perceived as negative, because planning for a nice vacation or a wedding or big celebration can be a challenge, and it can be stressful, versus having to deal with a natural disaster and a catastrophe, being on the distress side of things.
Absolutely.
And life is never going to be 100% perfect. There's ebb and flows and positive and negatives and everything. It's our response to those challenges on either side of the fence, whether we categorize them as distress or eustress, is how we respond to them and how the resilience that we build over time to weather events and challenges.
No, I absolutely agree, and I refer to it as building up your stress armor.
Oh, I love that.
Learning how to deal with stress better, because it's not going to go away, and that would be so unrealistic to think that it is. And so, yeah, it's a change of mindset. You shift your thinking, you shift your brain, and then, wow, is that cup of coffee okay? I'm running late, but why don't I just take a couple deep breaths, wipe it up, and move on? It's not like anyone's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of kind of resetting, what is, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, what really is the severity of this crisis that I'm meeting, and where's my reaction? Like, if the spilled cup of coffee is a 1 and I'm reacting like an 8, there's a problem here, right? So it's like, let's bring the reaction down. But that's tough to learn, though, especially when you are stressed and you get more irritable. I know, like, I will just, my girls can say something to me and I'll be like, rawr, and they're like, Mom, so they call me on it. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, that was a little rude. So
yeah, you mentioned thoughts earlier, that it starts with our thinking, our thought responses to outside events or outside triggers, and those are things that we've picked up over time. We've learned them from families of origin. We've picked them up from culture, and at so many levels, whether that's my work culture, my culture for my society that I live in, the city I live in, the side of the town I live in, all these kind of different containers that I've mentioned, explored before in other podcasts. And it takes some actual awareness, like you mentioned, like, and some questioning. Maybe that response isn't appropriate or serving me for a simple thing like spilling a cup of coffee or whatever, but it can be automatic. Our brains love patterns that we've repeated in the past. That's also why it's a challenge to change behavior and start in a new direction. But the brain gets good at what it focuses on. We can actually leverage self-directed neuroplasticity. Our brains can change, learn how to do something new, and we can direct that process. And it begins with thought. I love Joe Dispenza's insight on that our thoughts trigger our emotions trigger our moods trigger our behavior, and our behavior becomes our reality. So if we can catch it at that upriver and upstream with that thought process, and then challenge it and move it in a more positive direction, it can go a long way for establishing healthier and stress-free habits.
absolutely, yeah. And I teach, that's really one of the cornerstones, is is the stress awareness piece for me. The stress education. You have to understand, what stress is all about, and then the solution which I provide is the simple self-care. So,
Tell me a little more about the simple self-care.
so, so the definition for self-care is any intentional action you take to take care of your mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual health. So, we could talk about long walks and hikes and work out at the gym, and they take a longer, it's more planned, correct? And usually involves a change of clothing or shoes if you're going to go work out. And I have just found in my research and just talking to my clients and participants in my workshops that when you get busy, what is the first thing typically that you're going to drop out of your schedule? Is your self-care. So having time constraints when I was a new mom, I had to figure out what I could slide into my day. So the definition I've created of simple self-care is any intentional self-care action that is not complex, it's not rocket science, and it can easily slide into your day. So things like, oh my gosh, I feel like, I can't believe I just said that to Keith. Oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Oh, I think I better take a few deep breaths and wiggle my toes. So it's putting very simple things, doing 10 jumping jacks. It is taking a few extra steps, just going for a walk to the end of the driveway and back, or going outside and listening to the birds for a few minutes. So being very intentional, really to let your brain know you're not in danger, and then to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So
absolutely, get the foot off the gas pedal and the sympathetic nervous system onto the brake, so to speak, and the parasympathetic nervous system, or rest and renewal system. Because in our 24/7, 365 world, we don't take the opportunity like past generations have to just rest and be present. We call ourselves human beings, but we've become human doings. We're always doing something.
absolutely.
And then we do until we're in deep doo-doo.
Exactly. Well, and you think about our ancestors. So when I talk about ancestors, I think the ones that lived in the caves, or even, log cabins, or, they had a forced relaxation period where when the sun went down, that was it for safety. They had to gather their tribe, their family members within their dwelling. That's where the meals were made. And then while the kids were waiting, maybe the elders were telling stories. And so this was a natural time, because you couldn't do anything else, to just unwind. And you're right, unless we intentionally do that. And I encourage, in some of my workshops, I encourage, setting kind of a nighttime ritual, like at this time, shut your electronics off. And at this time, take your shower, or read a book, and find kind of a wind down pattern that you can keep repeating every night. So your brain recognizes, oh, I need to start slowing down. So it's time for me to go to sleep soon.
Yeah. And it hasn't been that long ago in human history where at the turn of the early 1900s, there was no electricity, and the only artificial light means were oil lamps and candles, and they were expensive. So when the sun went down, you rested. There was, like you mentioned, cycles to the day, and not the constant go, and chronic interruptions that we have, that we try and service with our brains. And our brains have a limited capacity to do that. That there's so much glucose and glycogen available, and before we just get exhausted. Yet somehow our minds do us this disservice that we got to keep doing, and keeping up with that when we do have a choice. I love your concept of asking a question of what's the simple thing that I can do to start a change, because that opens up choice and possibilities.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear.
I'm familiar, but I've read some other ones on habits and how we establish them, how we change them. Yeah.
And so James talks very much about just it's starting with that one small change, and he's even had a mathematical equation how if you make a 1% positive change every day for a year, you'll be da 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 da. And it, and I've used that concept in my book where, if you're always doing the same thing the same way, you're going to get the same results. But what if you were to, say you always took your vacation, you flew to the mountains. But say if you took the nose of that plane and moved it 1 degree over and then flew to your destination, might be, at a beach.
Yeah.
So making that one tiny change.
Could be Hawaii instead of New York.
Yeah, there you go. I'd rather go to Hawaii at this point. But yeah, and I think we get so caught up in, I need to see results tomorrow, and oh my gosh. And it's like, no, it's the long term. It's a process, and enjoy the process, because this is life right now. There's no, when I'm happy when I get blah blah blah. I mean, this is it. And especially with this pandemic, I've had so many business colleagues and friends and that have had someone die from COVID exposure, and it's not you don't know. You really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week, and so really being more mindful today, and hugging your kids, hugging your family, telling people, reaching out, and
cherishing and being present in the moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Much more. Yeah, I'm practicing gratitude, and yes, absolutely.
We often, most of us have been taught a distortion of what success is. We tend to focus on something that's an achievement or a goal or whatever, an event, and that's not the case. I've learned to redefine success as manifesting one's intent, and as you mentioned, it's a process. And the reward comes in the process, not in the event, because our brains get satisfied when that's achieved and it wants something more. Nothing wrong with that. But if we constantly are in that cycle and we never enjoy the journey, we're not going to be very fulfilled in life and very happy in life. So that's a major shift, is just to realize that success is a process. It's a journey.
It's okay to have what I call a yay me moment. There's so many of us that, oh, Keith, way to go. You did that. You've got this podcast, way to go. But then when it comes to giving ourselves kind of a pat on the back, we don't do it. So
that's critical. Yeah.
If you set up like, today I'm going to go for a walk, and you go for the walk, like I've literally gone, yay me, and it's just in front of the mirror, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, way to go, Rita, you did it. And I don't know why we feel like we can't do that. Why that's being, I don't know, conceited or arrogant or whatever. But yeah, we need to.
Yeah, there's actually solid brain science of why we should do that. If we keep a success journal or an accomplishment journal, whether it's on a health journey or establishing simple stress reduction techniques, that if we just write a simple statement, document where I'm making progress, it actually motivates us further, because our brain usually will tell us a negative story that we're not getting any progress or whatever. But when we document it on a daily basis, we can see it concrete. It's important to write it down, not type it, but write it down physically. And then you can see where you are along your journey. Yeah, hey, I'm halfway to where the outcome that I intended. And then do reward yourself along the way, even if it's just a sample, self-congratulatory pat on the back, because both of those processes, the documentation and the rewarding ourselves, give us little dopamine hits in the brain that motivate us further, and we get greater success.
Absolutely. Yeah, you and I are speaking the same language, Keith. Yeah.
Well, we've both had years of and the challenges of working through our own stresses and stressors in life.
And you mean?
I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. Probably spent in some cases a little too many years learning how to master it, but it's been an important part of my why I do why I do, and I'm sure it's for you as well. So, what's your major why regarding working with the clientele that you do?
Really, it's this is what my fourth career, I guess, if you take in respiratory and massage therapy and writing a book, and is my purpose to serve. I just really feel very strongly that all these things did not happen to me for nothing. Like to me, there's always lessons, and I want to be able to help and share others that they maybe don't have to go quite down the road I went down.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many times I felt so alone in my life, and I just don't want people to feel alone, because we have maybe, we all have different life stories. We all have different stories, but what we're experiencing, the emotions, and that we need love and all that good stuff, we're not alone. We're all I don't care who you are. Like we all need that. So just being able to share, and I'm really working on creating a stress less community,
Yeah.
and where you can get support and not feel alone.
And that's an important and worthy goal and endeavor, considering that stress is epidemic on the planet and then has been amplified with our current challenges. The good news is there's proven methodologies and techniques and simple things that we can do to offset those challenges.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite stories to share, actually, I heard on a podcast from Jonathan Fields in the Good Life Project. He was interviewing Cynthia Pasquale, and she had so many health issues that she had like 25 or 26, some different health conditions, from skin problems to digestive. The list went on, and she was like 21 or 22.
Oh my gosh.
Just nowhere to a miserable place to be at that young age, and she was on the threshold of suicide. By the grace of God, though, she had a little voice go off in her head that if she could keep someone else from experiencing that level of despair, that her life would have meaning. And she made one simple choice each day to change something that would improve her health outcome. It might be drinking a smoothie instead of, some unhealthy alternative or whatever. But she started doing this in a very short period of time. In a matter of weeks, she noticed that her body and mindset was changing, and her psychology was changing, that she wasn't having some of the skin problems that she did. And she pursued this, and people started to notice and wanted to know what she was doing and could they teach her how to do it. So it literally started a healthcare practice for her on a small scale initially, but that grew and grew and grew. Word spread, and then before you know it, she had a full-time business doing it. And she lived in LA, and word spread to the point where Oprah Winfrey wanted her on her show, and she had to make time in her schedule to go be on the Oprah show. And this exploded and exploded, and she's sitting at the kitchen table one evening complaining to her husband that in her teachings and trainings of others, and even teaching other health coaches, that she had to send them over here to get a nutrition class, over somewhere else to, get some sort of class on physiology or exercise or whatever. There was no one place, no university, no school that she could send people to get all the, pieces, parts that they needed for what they wanted to achieve. And he says, well, why you don't create? Why don't you create it? So she did. And she now has, in a very short period of time, I think it was like 6 or 7 years, she has a $1 billion industry, worldwide industry, helping people better their lives through better health outcomes. So you never know where your pain point in life, to your, your point of sharing your why, you never know where that's going to take you, and where it's going to add meaning to your life. I can't remember where I heard it, but I love the line is make your mess your message.
Nice. I like that. No, I haven't heard that one before. Make your mess your message.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we all have different pain points and challenges in life is how can we turn them into opportunity, learning for ourselves and others for that matter.
Yeah, because if we can't understand the suffering unless we've suffered. Right?
Absolutely, you won't have the empathy and the connection and the wisdom to share, how you move through it.
Absolutely.
So where can people find you on the internet?
Well, my website is simpleselfcare.net. And if anyone is interested in seeing really where their stress level is at, if you go to that page, there's a stress quiz, online stress quiz, and it'll give you a score and then some follow-up steps to kind of just start, reducing that stress and helping you build up your stress armor. So again, simpleselfcare, all one word, .net.
Yeah, and that resilience that we build to handle the stress is like a muscle. You have to flex it and exercise it regularly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll put Rita's links on the show or podcast notes, as well as a link to where you can find her Simple Self-Care Save Me book. Do you have any other publications in the horizon?
No, right now. My husband the other day said, "Oh yeah, you should write a book about that." And I'm just kind of looked at him like, "Okay, yeah, maybe." This year too. So no, and I do have a weekly text club, which is free. It just provides every Tuesday morning some motivation, inspiration. If people are interested in that, I can give you the information if you want to post it.
Yeah, I'll capture it at the end of or after we get off the podcast and share it with everybody. And it kind of fits that chunking metaphor that we talked about. Instead of trying to do it all at once, you can get the wisdoms and tips and small little tips and chunks. Well, it's been an absolute delight connecting with you again, Rita, and look forward to doing it again in the near future. And appreciate you being on the podcast today.
And thank you so much, Keith. I really appreciate reconnecting and wishing you the best of luck with all this. So I'm excited to see where it's all going to
go. Me too. It's an adventure for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And a process.
Yeah.